Well, hello and welcome to the Sydney Film Festival's series of curated interviews. You've just watched the documentary Seeds of Vandana Shiva, and now let's hear from the star herself. Vandana Shiva, welcome.
Indira, joy to be with you.
Yeah, it's fabulous to finally speak to you. I've been a long admirer of your work, read a number of your books, so I'm really looking forward to this chat. And the first thing I really want to ask you is, after seeing the documentary series, what did you think? I mean, it's not an easy thing to watch yourself on screen like that.
Well, you know, I was very embarrassed about the very idea, but Jim and Camilla have been very persistent and followed. This is made over years, as you can make out. Over years, and for me, it is a little embarrassing to see myself, but I'm grateful to them because they're large parts of my own life that kind of, went into a very remote shelf, and they're very precious parts. So I'm grateful to them that they put it all together.
And Vandana, you've been asked on a number of other occasions for your life to be captured on film. Why did you agree to this particular request?
There were two reasons I agreed. First was, Jim had been filming me for long before through the festivals on science, environment, and religion. That used to be in the Amazon, in the Arctic, in the Mediterranean, in the Baltics. And he was very dedicated. And I knew it's not for him a little fashion, to cover. And also I knew the background from where he came. And the second was that we are living through times, as you know well, where social media can spin a false message so quickly that reality is disappearing in people's lives and people's minds. And so I said, okay, if what the seed is can be made real for people, if what the struggle of the seed freedom is can be made real for people, if the different parts of the world that are rising together can come together in a film and not be erased because it's not convenient to the powerful, I said, it's all right, I'll do it.
That's an interesting point you make, Vandana, because you have a big social media following. You interact on social media very prolifically, but it's interesting that you feel that it's when your views and your ideas and your story is told in a documentary, it potentially can have much more power.
Absolutely, because as this documentary is able to capture, it is in space and time, yeah? So, I'm a physicist, and we know space-time is the continuum, it's four-dimensional. Desh-Kal in India, we talk about Desh-Kal, never time alone, never space alone, never one dimension alone. So the fact that a documentary can get so many dimensions together, a Twitter message cannot, no way.
And Vandana, when you were watching the documentary and you looked at the wide expanse over the number of decades of your activism in a number of areas, I mean, I think that will be what's fascinating to a lot of people who watch this documentary. You've got a high profile in this area of food and food activism, but there are other areas that you've also been very active in as well. The way the documentary captures all those aspects of your life, how do you feel about the portrayal, about the accuracy of the portrayal?
Well, I think, first of all, I didn't see one version of the final film because they took 2 years to finally edit. And then something would come back and say they need more on the suicide. So they'd actually go and get the footage on the suicide. For me, a determining moment was 1984, when Punjab erupted and the Bhopal violence took place. So in my mind, those are the two tectonic shifts that shifted my life to give priority to biodiversity, food, farmers. And this edition captures all that. It wasn't there in the early editions. They've worked very hard. I have to say, Jim and Camilla have worked very hard to edit this again and again and again and bring that reality, that was a forgotten reality to the people. I'm just, I'm just a messenger of a bigger reality. So when you ask how authentic is it, we've lived through these times. We've lived through Seattle. We've lived through the power of people stopping the biggest organization of the world in Seattle. 2009, Copenhagen, they captured that speech. People will be gathering soon for Glasgow. People forget that these COPs have been going on and on and on and on. And there's something dysfunctional about a system that cannot address a life and death crisis humanity is facing and just continue to talk or offer false solutions. So I think it's very authentic. And then they did their bit of bringing in all the planted critics here. For me, it's interesting because the same people defend nuclear, they defend tobacco, they defend everything wrong. And of course, they were unleashed on me. It's the same 4 or 5 names. And, it doesn't matter what I could be talking about. I could be talking about the sun and they'll have something to say and say, well, why is she talking about GMOs? For them, everything is a GMO. No, there's a sun and there's a seed that's not a GMO and there's beautiful soil and there are smiling faces all over the world. So they brought all of that in. So it is a very authentic film.
And Vandana, you mentioned some of the criticisms of you and some of your activism. You have a huge legion of fans, but you do have critics in some quarters, but in some unusual quarters. For instance, the New York Times did a profile piece on you that aired a number of those criticisms. How do you feel when areas of the media or supporter base criticize you when you would have thought they would have had a different approach?
Well, for one, this journalist who wrote in the New Yorker approached me to do a story on globalization. And he said, there are very few people who've looked at globalization and food, and would you be willing to be interviewed? I was at the United Nations for a high-level meeting, and I said, well, I'm arriving 6:30 p.m. You can come to my hotel 7:30 p.m. and I'll meet you briefly to see. And I spent an hour talking about globalization, free trade, dumping, and then it's shifted totally. And so, he approached me for a different story. And then he's cooked it all up, he's talked about, a farmer with the with the skin of burnt leather, as Kipling as you can become. Riding an elephant because he got so rich using BT cotton in an area where they don't grow BT cotton, So when you ask, how do I feel? For me, critics is you study a subject. You critique from a studied point of view. You're not one little, cog in a giant propaganda machine. I don't take propaganda seriously. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do the work I've done. I take criticism seriously, and I've taken negative feedback very seriously to constantly improve my own life, my thinking, my research.
All right. And when you look back, particularly focusing on the documentary, and you look at all those actions that you've taken, that you've been involved in, is there anyone that you look at and you think, oh, maybe I should have done that differently then?
No, every action I've taken is as a result of a very serious harm to the planet or to people. Bhopal and Punjab are examples. Otherwise, why would I even look at agriculture? Here I am studying physics and quantum theory. Why would I turn to agriculture? Because I found the harm too serious. 30,000 dead in Punjab, thousands dead in Bhopal. I said, where's this coming from? Where's this violence coming from? So I first did all the research. Then I took a pledge, I'm going to do a non-violent farming. I didn't know what it would mean because it was a path I had to walk to know what it would mean. So every activism of me that I have created has been a result of deep study, deep research, deep thought, deep consciousness, and I've made choices of conscience. And I have no regret. My conscience has always guided me to the right place.
Mm. You've received many, many awards for your work, and one particularly, obviously, because we are here in Sydney, Australia, uh, uh, celebrating your work at the film festival, was the Sydney Peace Prize that you were awarded in 2010. What was the impact of that prize on you and your work?
Well, I so appreciated the Sydney Peace Prize because my work has been guided by seeking nonviolent options to violent systems that are made to look inevitable. There is no alternative. There's no alternative to chemical fertilizers. So I look for ways to reduce soil fertility and regenerative agriculture. There's no alternative to GMO. So we started saving seeds. And our seeds are amazing, climate resilient, flood resilient, high in protein, high in quality. So the Sydney Peace Prize really goes to the heart of my work, which is for peace. Peace with the earth, peace among people. And of course, the Sydney Peace Prize works very hard to do their work. It gave me an opportunity to visit Sydney. Then it gave my sister, who accompanied me, an opportunity to see a kangaroo. She said, if I'm going to Australia, I'm going to see a kangaroo. And they were kind enough to organize a visit for her to see the kangaroo.
Yeah, lovely. They're wonderful. Vandana, when was the last time you were in Australia? And when you were here, what work were you involved in?
I definitely remember the Sydney Peace Prize visit. I do not think I have been back since then.
Right.
It's a long time.
Yes, it is a long time. You're due for another
But
visit.
you know, for 1.5 years have just disappeared in the history of this planet. You know, zoop, they've gone. So
yeah,
the first time was for the development agency. And my son was a little boy, and he accompanied me, and came back with a koala. No,
yeah.
a little toy koala.
Well, I know that because of your work, you keep abreast of all the political and social changes in the food policy area around the world. So in terms of Australia and where we are at the moment, of course, we're leading into you know, lots of climate change gatherings over the next couple of weeks. Where do you think Australia sits at the moment in terms of our food policy or lack of?
So, you know, Australia's both an ancient food culture, 60,000 years of farming. And we don't see it as farming because we totally blocked out the Aboriginal history. And it was when I gave this a lecture at the Sydney Opera House, they gifted me this beautiful book, The Biggest Estate on Earth, that recounts how the Aboriginal people of Australia are farmers, not just bushmen, farmers. They've cultivated the land. And then you've had a short 200 and little more year of farming, as if there were no limits. There were no ecological limits. Then dry lands were not dry lands, and wetlands were not wetlands, and forest lands were not forest lands. And in a way, Australia is seeing the result of it. You know, look at the fires you are having. If only there had been a continuity between the farming of the Aboriginal people, the first people of the land, and the settlers, and a humility in settling, a gratitude to the earth, a gratitude to the original people, we wouldn't be having the crisis Australia is facing. And I think Australia, as in every other part of the world, will have a farming future and a food future only if we align with the laws of the earth, we align with the guidance of indigenous cultures who worked with those laws and therefore are the experts, and we undo the harms of 500 years of colonialism for the rest of the world, 200 for Australia, undo the harm of the fossil fuel age, which created amazing illusions that the world is a machine, there are no limits, that you can just keep mining out 600 million years of nature's burial of a living material and burn it and wipe out the idea of a living earth. Then create more fake solutions like carbon capture in machines, when the little leaf has the most amazing carbon capture, takes the sunlight, takes the carbon dioxide, turns it into our food and the oxygen we breathe. No technology that is man-made is more superior to that technology that nature has given us. So all of us have to go for a very, very radical shift in these 500 years of colonial false assumptions and 200 years of fossil false assumptions, and turn to a living earth and living cultures. And if we manage to do that, we have a future as a species. If we do not manage to do that, the IPCC, the IPBS, all have said, we've got a 10-year window of transition. We could go extinct like the 200 species we are driving to extinction every day. And I don't think an intelligent species makes a deliberate choice for extinction.
Well, it certainly feels like there's been a shift here in Australia in terms of really addressing the climate emergency that we've been going through. So it'll be really interesting in the next couple of months to see what changes happen here. In terms of an international perspective, Vandana, when you look at where we've been 40 years ago, where we are now, have we made the changes in that period of time that you would have hoped we would have made in these 40 years?
Well, there are two parts that are growing very, very fast, and they're very divergent parts. One path is a path of healing the earth, healing society, healing the wounds of all kinds. And it is an awakening to the real laws that matter, the ecological laws that make earth systems work. And then the other is limitless greed, the illusion of growth as an extractive measure. The faster you can take out coal and oil and minerals, the more you're growing, even though everything that supports life is dying. And this polarization is very high. When you ask me what has changed, when I started talking seeds, we were 3 of us who talked GMOs and patenting. Now they are the big movements. They stopped policies of deregulation right now all over on gene editing crops. Organic, it was a few people who were doing it. We were 8 people who got together in the 80s to create a coalition of organic farming. Today, there are millions of organic farmers, and during the COVID and the lockdown, everyone woke up to the fact that eating matters. Your food determines your immunity. Bad food gives you diabetes, bad food gives you toxics and cancer, and they increase the risks of your dying of an infection. The infection doesn't kill you, the comorbidities kill you. They begin with bad food. So people have woken up to eating as a foundational element of being alive and being healthy. And these two are growing very, very fast. And if you take numbers, I think the regenerative movement is growing, exploding right now all over the world. And then you've got the 1%. My latest book, Oneness versus 1%, actually about the 0.0001%. They're not growing in numbers, but they're growing in the exercise of power, hijacking the World Food Summit, trying to hijack the Climate Summit, and I hope they're not successful, the Biodiversity Summit. So we are at a threshold of democracy. And that's why I say we will reclaim democracy for humans only when we are able to sow the seeds of an earth democracy for all life, because we are interconnected, we are one. We cannot anymore put nature and ourselves as being in competition. We cannot live a future based on ecological apartheid. We will have to come to terms that we are part of the earth, we are living, and we can make intelligent choices.
And Vandana, you made a reference to it a bit earlier. We are obviously living through COVID times, one of the worst pandemics in human history. What effect do you think it will have on the way forward when it comes to food justice in the world? Will this have set us back?
As I already mentioned, we are in a very polarized situation. So one part of the pole would like to make food disappear and farming disappear. And farming without farmers, food without farms, labs everywhere, artificial ingredients, synthetic biology. But when we know, with the last 30 years of globalization, the harm that ultra-processed foods have done, 10 years of awakening, Ayurveda, the science of living, already knew thousands of years ago that it's all in the gut. It's the gut is the basis of health. Now, ecological medicine is awakening it to the fact that the gut microbiome is where health starts. But the gut microbiome, its health is decided by the food we eat. So if ultra-processed food with chemical additives, GMOs and Roundup and glyphosate have already caused huge explosion of chronic diseases, fake food makes it that same Roundup ready soya, a little more ingredients made more, with more fake material, fake blood and fake this and fake this. It is not taking into consideration the 100 trillion microbes in our gut. It's not taking into account the recognition that the health of the soil, the health of the plants, the health of our gut microbiome is one health. And we're still trying to trick ourselves into thinking, where can I make the next money? My God, seed patenting was one idea. And I'm so glad I started my work. And I think we put that one to rest. It's not that it has ended, but it hasn't become 100%, which was the dream of the industry that wanted to own and patent all seed.
So do you think, yeah, so Vandana, do you think the pandemic will help people refocus on the central importance of real food?
I think people are focusing on the central importance of real food. And I'm talking about women in the villages with whom I work. Every time we meet, they come back with more knowledge of how they addressed the pandemic, and no COVID in the villages where food was the beginning of addressing the pandemic. And all the way to the best of literature, there's now literature showing that the immunity that comes from food actually blocks the infective protein from catching hold of your cells. So living organisms are such amazingly complex systems of preventing the harm. And we forgot that. What builds the capacity of our body to prevent harm is the food we eat. And that's why we cannot be negligent about what we eat. We are, after all, what we eat.
Yes, absolutely. Vandana, you mentioned before about social media and fake news. It is very hard now for people to get real information, authoritative information about food. What is food? What is the food that we should be eating? If there is one message that you can give to the people who have come along to watch all the films at the Sydney Film Festival and are very concerned about the food system, what is that one message that they can do as individuals in their own lives?
If you can grow some of your food in a pot in your balcony, in a little patch in your garden, and in Australia, there's no dearth of land, know what you're eating. Know the farmer who grew your food and work with the farmers who grew the food with love and care. And respect the earth, respect the seed, respect the farmer, respect your body.
Terrific. Vandana, thank you so much for talking to me today, and congratulations on the documentary.
Thank you so much, Indira.